Hey, everybody, welcome to We Gotta Talk. I am so excited about today's guest. Have you ever asked the question, should I stay or should I go? Whether it's about a long term relationship or a marriage. Well, today's guest hopefully will help you get a little closer to the answer. Colette Fehr is a licensed marriage family therapist and a licensed mental health counselor, but she specializes in couples therapy in the Orlando area. She's also the author of an upcoming book with Penguin Random House that should be out next year. But today, for these purposes, she is breaking down everything that couples need to know to weather life's storms, to be the happiest version of yourself. And we get into really, really great detail about all of the phases that really every relationship goes through, especially if you're building a family together and making some sort of commitment to each other. So here are some of the things we cover, those phases that every relationship goes through, and specifically what defines them, how to get through them in the best way possible while keeping that passion, keeping that respect and love for your partner. We talk about what happens after you have kids. Listen, I don't care how Instagram perfect of a couple you look. If you have children, I know you've gone through this. It's really hard to adjust to welcoming children into a family. So we really dig in on that phase of a relationship. This one was a surprise, though. The stresses that come about when your children fly the nest. So empty nest syndrome and how that typically manifests in couples. We talk about attachment language, what that is, and how to use it sort of to your advantage if you're having any sort of conflict or heated discussion with your partner, how to argue, and most importantly, how to figure out if this is your person. Colette has seen a lot when it comes to couples, and you'll hear her talk about this as well. She's been through a divorce of her own. And so the perspective she brings to couples therapy and to, helping couples weather the storms is really unique in multiple ways. And so you'll hear what she says about, I asked her the percentage of people that end up staying together after seeking couples counseling with her, and she breaks that down for me. This is an amazing episode, exactly what you're going to want if you are in any relationship phase or readjustment or change. And Colette just has amazing advice. So enjoy this interview with Colette Fehr on We Gotta Talk. Colette Fehr, all's fair in love and war. We were just laughing about that. Thank you for joining me on We Gotta Talk.
Thanks for having me, Sunny. I'm excited to be here.
I adore you. We've met in person. You have a book coming out next year, like I mentioned in the intro with Penguin Random House. You are in your wheelhouse when it comes to couples health, mental health, how to show up as the best version of yourself in whatever relationship you're in. And I'm really excited that we get to talk about all of this today because, a lot of my listeners are in relationships or married, and it's a long haul, hopefully. And
Yeah.
it can get difficult, right?
Absolutely. I think it is difficult at various seasons for
Mhm.
periods of time. And if you know how to navigate those seasons with more open, connected communication, then you have the tools you need to weather the storm and get to the other side.
Stereotypically speaking, what are some of the seasons in a marriage or a long-term relationship where couples will not inevitably, but typically face some sort of strife or issue?
Absolutely. So the first is coming out of the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase is marked by limerence for most people, which is when you're just so in love and you're basically high on a bunch of neurochemicals that act like nature's opioids
Hmm.
to minimize differences and make couples feel that butterfly sensation about everything each other does. Inevitably, that passes and then couples get into the this is real life stage. And that can happen anywhere from 6 months on the low end to 3 years in, but typically happens at about the 2 year mark. So that's the first kind of hurdle to navigate. But it's a great opportunity to say, okay, now that we're past honeymoon bliss, how do we really build emotional intimacy and a truly connected relationship that's built on a foundation of friendship and maintains romance? But after that, the two most typical I see, the biggest, are after a couple has kids. I
Hmm.
think that is the number one most challenging phase in a relationship possible. Of course, not everyone has kids, but many couples do. And all of a sudden, it's not about just the two of you. There's
Hmm.
tremendous stress. There are more demands pulling on your time, and a relationship can become kid centric. So couples have to renegotiate their roles, how they're going to split those tasks, and how they're going to maintain the spark.
Hmm.
And then the third and final big one I see in terms of when people come in is the empty nest.
Oh, that was you have kids, you start having problems. You lose the kids to the real world, not lose
Yeah.
them, but they go away and you have problems again. Colette, I was thought we were over the hurdles, but I guess we have one
Yes.
more to go. What is
Yeah.
that? Okay, I want to go through each one. I think the kids are self-explanatory, the problems that sort of arise from that. And
Yeah.
you hit on one, which is less time for each other, maybe a set of new identities. I know a lot of women who have sort of struggled to show up as the best version of themselves. I always say, like, especially that, and it's most evident in the moment after you put the kids to bed and you come back downstairs as like an individual woman again. And I'm like, don't come near me for a second. I got to close out mental shop of that one and like reopen like fun, sunny, like, the one who's more carefree.
Yeah.
But I have found that like a little bit of an exercise of, okay, deep breath, these both coexist, but let me just move into the next phase has been helpful for me.
Yeah. Shifting gears. Yeah.
Shifting gears, yeah. Yeah, so I guess let's speak to that, then we'll get to the empty nest. What advice do you have for women? That's the way that I sort of remember who I am beyond my identity as a mother, but what else do you tell women in particular to do so that they can show up as that person? Because, as a husband or a partner would naturally expect that individual to be present in addition to the role that they take on as a mom.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point to make. I know I really struggled at that phase and, in fact, got divorced when I had little kids because, I mean, of many, many things. But in large part, most of this leads back to being able to talk about these
Mm,
things in an open hearted way because you do have a dual identity, especially as a woman. We know women are still handling 75% of the household domain, even those who are working full time.
mhm,
So even when you have a very helpful partner, it's a lot on women. And we go from being out in the world, feeling very accomplished perhaps and confident as women of a certain age. By the time we have kids, we've often just gotten into that place of like knowing who we are and feeling our groove. And then you have kids, and it's like, okay, now I have to reacclimate to this new identity. But I
mhm,
think it all goes back to, do you have a relationship where you can talk to your partner if you're struggling with, by the end of the day at 8 o'clock, I used to pour that little glass of like Pinot Grigio and think, oh my God, I don't know how I survived the day just with all the requirements and, getting my child's brain developed. And did I give them enough attention? And did I do the laundry? Much less being present and having the emotional energy to reconnect. But when you can come to your partner and say, I'm struggling. Sometimes at the end of the day, I know it's time for us to connect and I've got nothing left, and
mm.
finding out how your partner's doing. That conversation is what's really going to create the most connection between you, more than being on or being in such a particular emotional space.
What are some prompts that we can say as women to our partners to say, hey, I'm navigating a tricky mind space. I'm trying to shift between identities, for lack of a better descriptor. Be patient with me. What can women say to express to their partners that, hey, I swear I'm not trying to show up as like a different version of my old self, but I'm struggling. What can we say?
Well, first of all, I love what you just said. Exactly that. So often we just need to say the truth about what we're feeling and thinking and needing and just spit it out. And I
Mm,
think a great way, in terms of just a catchphrase, is remembering to use what I call attachment language. And
mm,
that means attachment language is anything that reminds your partner about how important they are to you. So saying something like, listen, you're really important to me, and spending time with you is really important to me. And I also am feeling really drained and exhausted. I just want to let you know what's going on. I feel like I need a couple minutes. Is that cool? Like, what are you wanting and needing in this moment? Just really transparent, open-hearted communication. Because the problem is that we expect people to intuit our mind space, to kind
Mhm,
of read our
mhm.
mind, figure out how we're feeling, or we're afraid that we will irritate them or push them away if we say the truth. And that's what starts to make it more complicated.
Yeah, and I think too there's a fear that, my partner won't understand this new version of me. And because a lot of times we're struggling to have those identities coexist. It's an adjustment. I don't think I fully sort of assimilated my identities until, not that I have like multiple personalities, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
But
no, it's a
was
very valid
able
point.
right, until maybe years into parenthood, and it was like, and it was downloading an app in the background. It was slowly happening every day,
Yeah,
but I don't even think that I was fully able to articulate some of that. So, um, I do think that's important for the non-childbearing parent to know in a situation.
absolutely.
It's a change on every level. It's chemical, it's physical, it's emotional. Motherhood is just rocks your world in every way. So,
Yes. And
maybe
you
more
don't have to
understanding
have
of
it
that.
all. Yeah, and you don't have to have it all figured out, because you're right. I don't think we have this global perspective at every stage of the journey.
Mhm,
It's even as simple as saying, "Hey, I really want to, part of me really wants to connect with you right now, and
mm,
another part of me is feeling so drained." To me, it would be amazing if we could just like sit here side by side in each other's presence. That would make me feel close and connected to you. Like, what are you needing and wanting, right? It's
mm.
just telling your partner what you feel and need and asking with curiosity where they are. That's all we really need.
What if your partner is unwilling to understand?
Well, that's a whole nother can of worms. So
Mm,
I think that you cannot absolutely control for that, right? It's another
mm,
human being with many, many variables. And there's truth to the fact that some people just can't hear you and get it. Sometimes they have defense mechanisms up that prevent them from hearing and getting it. But when I'm working with couples or women individually from more of like a coaching perspective, the idea is that when you are saying your truth very clearly, without criticism, without blame, open-hearted stance, right?
mhm,
Letting your partner know, this is what I'm feeling, needing, thinking, and you're curious about them. That's really all you can do. And so, what
mm,
I would encourage people to do if they're repeatedly giving messages that are clear and self focused, and what I mean by that is lots of I statements. You're telling your partner about yourself, not
mhm,
pointing the finger at them. You never, you always, right? But
mm,
coming
yeah,
to them and saying, yeah, it's so easy to go there, but this is what I'm experiencing as a mom, as a wife. If you're repeatedly sending the same message and you're doing it clearly and kindly and being assertive and your partner's not hearing you, then I would reflect that back and say,
mm,
I've expressed this several times and I'm trying my best to tell you very clearly and kindly. And I don't feel like you're really hearing me or understanding. What
mhm,
can we do differently? Let's engage their curiosity. We're a team, and I don't want to keep banging my head against the wall, but I'm not feeling understood. So can
mhm.
we talk about this a little more deeply? You
Is
know,
there anything, and you don't have to answer this because it's personal,
yeah,
and I'm not trying to therapize you, but is there anything
no.
you would have done? You said you were divorced when your kids were
Yeah.
young. Do you think that, and you were coming at this with all of the knowledge and perspective that a
Well, I
professional
didn't have it
therapist.
then. I didn't have it
You
then. I
didn't.
hadn't gone to
Oh.
graduate school. Yeah, I became a couples therapist because of my failed marriage, but specifically
Mm.
because of my failed experience in marriage counseling with someone who wasn't helpful. That's what inspired me to go back to school and learn to really help those who want to stay married do so. Yeah.
That's so powerful. Would you have done anything differently knowing
Yes.
what you know now? You would have.
Hell
What,
yes.
tell me, what's, you don't have to like get too personal. I know
Yeah.
that there's like stuff at stake here that's like, you have a family, but with what you're
Yeah.
comfortable sharing, what would you have done
Sure.
differently?
Sure. So in terms of what I would have done differently, right? I couldn't control for what my ex-husband contributed to the equation. But at
Mhm,
that point in my life, I was in my late 20s. I got divorced at 31. So I got
mm,
married very young. And I made the mistake of thinking that I could only really communicate my feelings if they were received well. And so what I did was I sent kind of mixed signals, or I'd kind of test the waters and be like, I'm feeling kind of lonely and I don't feel connected. And if that didn't get received, then I would just say, well, forget it because it's only going to
mm,
cause a fight. I'm not getting heard. And I shut down and I got a little passive aggressive.
mm,
I wouldn't really come out directly and say, look, I am not feeling connected. These are the things that I really need to change. When you ignore me, let's just say, at the end of the day,
mhm,
I'm making this up, but I did feel ignored. When you
mm,
come home and ignore me, I feel like I'm alone in this. I don't know
mm,
how to reach you. And I'm trying to tell you that, and I don't feel like you're hearing me. And I'm worried for our relationship if this doesn't get addressed. You're really important to me. Can we
mhm,
please talk about some kind of connection ritual that works for you and works for me? Because if both of our needs get met, then we win as a team. I wish I had been more direct because, worst case, you get information about what your relationship can and cannot provide you.
right. Would it have turned out differently, do you think?
I'm not sure it would have. I think my ex and I have talked. In fact, I just spent the weekend with him and his wife and my husband at parents' weekend for my daughter. And we've had conversations since that we got together very young. He seems to be much more attuned to his current wife, and I wish him well for that. I'm very different in my current marriage. I think we both learned a lot, as
Mm,
one does, through our failed marriage,
mm.
and we're doing better on this round. I don't know that anything I did or said would have gotten through, but I do know that I'll never know for sure because I didn't change the way I showed up.
Oh my gosh, that's so deep and heavy. Like, wow. I mean, you deal with this stuff every day though, so I'm sure nothing. It's just, but it's perspective, if nothing else, right? Like you
Yes,
said, when you have these conversations and honesty, at the very least, you're going to get the truth, whether that's the truth that holds your marriage together or that pushes you down the path of separation and divorce, you're going to get the
exactly.
truth. Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's speak a little bit to the empty nester, which is another transition in a relationship. What are you seeing there? Because we have a lot of listeners who are in that stage of life as well.
Yeah, and I'm in that stage of life too. And
Mm,
even though my husband, we've been together 12 years, we've been married for 8 years. He's not the father of my children, but he has his own daughters. So
mhm,
we have gone through a lot of those growing pains regardless. And what I see often with couples who come into my office is that this is a big time that people get divorced because many people have been very kid focused,
mm,
especially in the modern climate where kids are the epicenter of our lives, right? Very
mhm,
different from how it used to be for Gen X, baby boomers, even older millennials. Now
mhm.
we focus on our kids and their activities. So a lot of people wake up at the empty nest phase and they look around and go, "Oh, you're the only one here and I don't even really know you anymore." We live kind of separate lives. Like we go out to dinner with our couples and we celebrate the holidays, but you're doing this and I'm doing this, and we're not emotionally connected.
How do you know if
So,
that's happening while it's happening? Let's pause there for a
yeah,
second because there are
yeah.
people in the lead up to that. You know, we have kids, we love it, we live that life and help them grow. But give us the tips before we get to the moment they're leaving to keep it together.
Yeah. So keeping your relationship going, there are a couple things you can do to prevent yourself from getting to that disconnected place. And one is expressing frequent appreciation for your partner. It's just
Mhm.
brain science. People need compliments, minimum of 5 positives to every one negative you express.
Okay.
Ideally, 20 positives to every one negative. This is research based. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and how many per day, per week? Like, give us a quota.
I mean, I would at least me saying 1 or 2 positive things, specific positive things to your partner every day. And what I
Yeah.
mean by this is expressing appreciation. Because what happens is the brain has a negativity bias. And as time goes on, we get very comfortable in our relationships. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. And it's easy to just kind of put that on the back burner and only communicate about something when it's not what we want to happen.
Mm. Mhm.
So taking the time to say things like, "Hey, thanks for unloading the dishwasher without me asking you to.
Right.
Thanks for cleaning out the garbage in my car. That was so sweet. You know, you didn't have to do that. Thanks for leaving me a note. Thanks for giving me a compliment." Little time, look for the good in your partner. If
Mhm.
you don't do it, you will gradually drift into disconnection. If you're not actively connecting and focusing on the positive, you will drift into disconnection and negativity.
And inevitably, no matter how Romeo and Juliet, like, minus the deaths at the end, your relationship is in the beginning, all relationships are going to need that, right? Because I think people have
Yes.
this idea that if I'm with the right person, that should all come naturally. But there's upkeep to every relationship, no matter how maybe slow of a simmer it started, or how explosive with passion and obsession and love. I mean, this is like standard protocol, right? I think there are people who think, oh no, if we're really meant to be together, he should know this or she should know this.
I think you're absolutely right. And I love your term upkeep because
Mm,
that is really what it is. It's not that a relationship should be so hard and such grueling work, but a relationship takes maintenance. It needs
mm,
love and attention. Your relationship is a being. Right?
mm,
It needs to be fertilized and watered. Otherwise, it is going to die like any other plant out there.
mm,
So it's a living, breathing thing. And, you know, a little bit, if you start early creating habits of connection, a little bit will go a long way. So, just in addition to nurturing with appreciation, you know, a date night is great, but it's worthless if you're not really connected. So you
mm,
should be having deeper conversations and check ins. I recommend a weekly check in. How's everything going? How are you feeling about your life outside of the relationship? What's
mm,
working well? What are you proud of? What are you afraid of? What do you need more of from me?
mhm.
Right? And then you talk about that in each direction.
Like, just you
Regular.
like you said with the just having kids thing, like, be honest, like, "Hey, let's get uncomfortable for a second in the name of being more comfortable down the line."
Yes, and you have to build a muscle to get a little uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the less scary it is, and the
Mhm,
more you actually know what your partner's feeling and needing. I mean, some people, Sonny, by the time they get to empty nest, they haven't had a real conversation about how they're feeling and what they're needing emotionally in
mhm,
20 years.
mm. Yeah, I gosh, I have to I'm just thinking back to the moments, like, we're very open about how we feel, I mean, maybe to a fault, and but
Me too. Me too.
Yeah, we talked about this before. I'm like, it's probably I should probably put a cap on it. Like, too much honesty, too many check-ins. Um, but
No,
I
I
am
think
gonna
I think that's good. I think that's good.
better too much than too little. That's how I think.
Yes.
But I do want to get some pointers out there to get men talking, not to be stereotypical, but
Yeah.
whatever. Stereotypes exist for a reason, and sometimes men are harder to access when it comes to, plopping down on the couch and being like, where do you see us in 20 years when the kids leave the house? So give us some great conversation starters for people in relationships with men who tend to be maybe a little more guarded or not as naturally wanting to share that for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very fair point. Some people have never had these kind of conversations, and men are
Mhm.
socialized not really to get into emotions. But I would argue that that's part of what we need to do is
Mm,
not tap dance around it too much. And it
right.
doesn't have to be big global conversations. It's as simple as saying, you know, are you feeling connected to me lately? What could I do to make you feel more appreciated? Are
Mm,
there things, are you wanting more time with me? You know, really showing that you're open and curious because
mhm.
a lot of men and some women too, but men in particular, they are partner focused. They
Mhm,
have a mentality of like, if my wife, let's just go heteronormative for a moment.
mhm,
And I recognize that not everyone is in a heterosexual relationship, of course. But in a heterosexual relationship, many men have been socialized to believe if my wife's happy,
mm,
then I'm doing a good job. If
mm,
my wife's not happy, I'm failing. So it makes it very difficult for women sometimes to bring up a legitimate complaint without a man shutting down, getting dismissive or
right.
defensive and saying, "Oh, but I do all these things for you. Why aren't you happy?" Right? You're not seeing. So this is where it's really good to give the appreciation, but also to say to a male partner, we don't want to chase after them to give all this emotion that they don't even
Mm,
know they're feeling, but just like, hey, I'm open here. I want to hear what you need. Are you feeling like we're having sex often enough? I know it takes some courage to bring these things up, but let's say your partner isn't feeling like you're having sex enough. And sex is a primary way. It's not about having an orgasm or getting off like some women think. Sex is a primary way that men feel emotionally connected. So
mhm,
having the courage to say, how do you feel about our physical intimacy? Is there
mm.
something we could do differently? You know, being curious is the best way you're going to help your partner feel safe, especially being curious and receiving the information without getting defensive.
That's hard too because like we said before, we wear many hats as women, and again, speaking to a heteronormative relationship, but there is always probably a partner who wants sex more and a partner who is, I mean, likes it, but isn't like as
Yeah.
needful.
Yeah. It's very,
And
very rare that a libido is perfectly matched.
right, right. So I think that's fair. And again, like jumping into the cold water of the truth rather than, oh, well, it's really embarrassing. But I mean, there's even something sexy about someone who's like willing to like show up and be like, hey, what do you need? How can I do this for you? How can I that shows up with that vulnerability?
The vulnerability is extremely sexy. It's a love language, right? It is
Mm,
the primary love language. And when you are vulnerable with your partner and open and curious, you set the stage for them to do the same. You can't force them to meet you, but you make it much easier and much
mhm,
safer for them
mhm,
to say, it's really uncomfortable to tell you this, or I'm not used to
right,
talking about this, but I do kind of feel sometimes like I wish we had
mm,
sex more often, or
mhm.
right? And then you know what? You have this beautiful opportunity to explore what, if anything, could we do differently? And even if you can't do anything differently, you're connected through the conversation.
So let's round up discussion on the empty nesters and then get back into some just general discussions of people maybe on the brink of trying to
Yeah.
decide the fate of a relationship. One final bit of advice for people transitioning into that period of their relationship. We talked about being honest and vulnerable about our needs and maybe trying to find something that keeps us together as a couple aside
Yeah.
from the kids. What else would you want them to know?
Definitely two things I want to throw out very quickly. One, really prioritizing the physical relationship,
Mm,
sex, physical intimacy. It doesn't have to be about orgasm. It doesn't have to be about checking a box, but maintaining physical intimacy is very important. It's one of the three domains of a relationship. So put some energy into that. And the other thing is doing new things. You need to laugh and play and have a good time with your partner. And oftentimes, when couples do break up at empty nest, it's because they have let that go a long time ago and gotten pulled into career and children. So prioritize your relationship along the way. Give it some energy. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Go walk in a different route. Go someplace fun for the day that you've never explored. Go 3 towns over and take a flipping walk. That's enough
mm.
for your brain to go, oh, this is new and we're doing it together, and really see your partner with new eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And yeah, even like during the course of the crazy kid years, just to seek out adventure feels like a good tip.
Yes, yes, it's
Oh,
so important. That's kind of how you disconnection proof your relationship.
I love that. I love that phrase. All right, let's talk now to the people out there, Colette, who are on the brink of deciding what to do, right? Maybe they feel like they have pulled out all the stops when it comes to preventing these issues or addressing these issues, and they're like, "Oh my god, do I stay or do I go?" I'm sure you see a lot of this working in couples therapy. Maybe most of your clients, are they on the brink, would you say? Or maybe
No,
it's half maintenance, half, I don't know.
surprisingly not, surprisingly
Oh,
not.
good.
I think it's only probably about 20% of people who come in
Mm,
to see me at this point. Most people are like, "I'm in, I love my partner, but where we're stuck has to change, and I
right.
don't know what to do to get to that change."
Okay, so for those 20%, what there's no black and white, excuse me, answer to this, I'm sure. Um, where do you go with them in that discussion when they sit down and say, "Do I stay with this man or this woman, or how do I know? How does someone know?"
Oh, it's so hard and it is so complex. So, there's a type of couples therapy I do called discernment counseling. It's not my own protocol, it's based on the work of Dr. William Doherty. He
Mhm.
has been a therapist for, I don't know, 50 years, something unbelievably, eternal. And he
Mhm.
developed this protocol specifically because of what you're talking about. Couples therapy, traditional good couples therapy, is really for partners who say, "I don't know if this is going to get better, but we're all in and we both are ready to roll up our sleeves and see if we can make it work."
Mhm.
Sometimes when people are on the brink, they need something different. They need help just deciding if they even have the energy left to pursue working on it and if they should or shouldn't. And it's
Hmm.
a very personal, nuanced decision. So, what I really want to say to people, if you're in that space, is first of all, seek help because there's a reason only 20% of people in my office are at that point. A lot of times, people are just kicking around in their own head
Mm.
and they're playing the same tape over and over again. Like, and often it's a more false sense of feeling trapped than really exists. Well, I
Hmm.
guess I've tried to communicate, but I don't want to leave. So there's nothing else to do. I guess I'll just sit here and put up with it and be miserable. And
Mhm.
that's the recipe for resentment. So you often will need, and if you don't want to go to a couples therapist, at least go to an individual, consider going to an individual therapist, a coach, somebody trained specifically in relationship dynamics, because
Mhm.
otherwise you may get someone who just encourages you to walk out the door and
Mhm.
really take a 360 look at the relationship and what it offers versus what it doesn't. What would you regret if you left? What stone have you not turned over? Because you don't want to get to the place where you say, "Oh, I thought I had no choices left, but now looking back, we could have gone to couples therapy." What
Yeah.
is it going to cost you emotionally, physically, financially to spend 3 months in couples, 3 months, 6 months, and see if there's more hope before you
Mhm.
call it? You
Mhm.
usually really need somebody to get in there with you and help you unpack what's happening.
And how many times are you able to turn the ship around, so to speak? What percentage of times do you have people come in and they are on the brink, or so they believe, and leaving a relationship, and you're able to get with them and or with their partner and help them to have a realization that keeps them together?
I don't know the exact percentage, but a surprisingly great number of times. Like I would
Mm.
say, offhandedly, I would say 2/3 of the time. However, I do wanna say that when I do that type of work, discernment counseling, I'm
Mhm.
not trying to get people to stay together. It's an
Mm.
agendaless thing. I'm trying to help people figure out what they want because it's their life, and I don't see staying together as necessarily better unless they do. If
Mm.
they are if
Mhm.
they're saying, "We want to stay together, but we just don't feel like it's gonna work,"
Right.
that alone tells me they both want the same thing, and most of the time we can turn that around. When you
Mhm.
can't turn it around is when one person is really done. They've
Mm.
exited the relationship and they don't know it yet, or they know it and they're not brave enough to say it, then I
Yeah.
help them to own their truth. The biggest thing I want to say, though, Sunny, about this is that the earlier you address your problems, the less likely it is you get to this point.
Right, right. The preventive work that we talked about, the check-ins,
Yes,
the assessments, the
yes.
honesty. Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, and, the other thing, can I say one more thing about this? If you're
Yes,
in that
yes.
brink, do not rely on just your girlfriends
Uh,
and the people around you, because 'cause you're in an echo chamber then of people who are only hearing your side of the story. They have no idea what your partner is experiencing,
mhm,
and they're on your side, first of all, and second
mhm,
of all, they're going to project their own relationship biases onto you. You're not going to get good feedback even from the most loving friends and family.
mhm. You need to get with a professional.
And get some objective feedback, and more importantly, have someone ask you questions that helps you figure out what's really right for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because our friends want to be there for us, and they play the role that they should, which is support and making us feel seen. But I do agree, and especially with women, sometimes we're just like, "Go, girl," like I don't want to be like advising anyone though to dip out of their relationship because
Right.
that's
And people
it-
do.
yeah. I mean, I'm so of two minds about this because I've seen enough of life to understand that there are circumstances that necessitate separation and divorce, even when there are kids involved, but also old enough to appreciate that sometimes the old fashioned way is best, right? To like grit it out and tough it out through those difficult seasons because they see the fruit of a beautiful relationship at the end, even if that period is a couple of years long and difficult. And I know, like I said, there's no black and white answer to this, but has your work made you believe any certain truths about marriage in either the positive or the negative direction based on the work you've done?
Yeah. Yeah. What it's made me realize is a couple things. One, nobody, including a marriage counselor, should ever be making that decision for you or telling you. If you go to a therapist who tells you you need to get out of this relationship, run.
Mm,
That's not
mm,
ethical and it's not appropriate. Two, what I've realized, and that's because, let me just say this, that's because it is individual to the person. That dichotomy you just illuminated is really about each individual's values and what you want. If
mm,
your relationship is a train wreck and you come in here and say, we are a hot mess. We've cheated on each other. We're screaming at each other, but we have 4 kids and we want to make this work. Great. Let's dig in and roll up our sleeves. We got a lot of work to do, but we're going to figure it out. If you
mm,
come in here and your life is pretty idyllic and you're saying, in my heart, I just don't think I can stay in this, and we have 4 kids, then my job is to help you look at all the sides of that and
mm,
make sure that that's really what you want. And then, great, that's your truth. So there's
mhm,
no, if anything, this work has showed me there's no one thing that should happen for everybody. Everybody's
mhm.
got to figure out what's really right for them. And that's a very difficult process.
Sure. I interviewed a woman probably last year, this exact, oh my gosh, it was like right this week, I think last year. It was the
Wow.
last week of September. And she's a woman who shared her story about why she stayed after her husband was unfaithful to her. And the reaction to this was just massive because you have your camp of women in particular who were like, I totally get it. Like they were invested in their children together in their home and their life. And then you have a whole different camp of women or men who are like, how dumb can you be? I'm sure you see a lot of that though on the issue of infidelity in particular. And if you could just, I know we only have a couple of minutes left here, but just
Yeah.
maybe speak to that specific set
Yeah.
of people who've endured that and with the understanding that there's no right answer, what you generally advise should that be the situation.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. It's very common, and what I see is most people get through infidelity and get to the other side and have a better relationship than they ever imagined. Now, it's gonna take you a good 2 years of work, real, no
Dig in.
bullshit, dig
Mhm.
in, regular therapy, because it is an attachment injury, it's a betrayal. It takes time to process the shock, move through all the pain, rebuild trust, grieve the loss of the innocence that you once
Mm.
had. But I wish more people knew how many people go through infidelity and work through it. The reason we think it's so rare and we think most people get divorced is because people obviously, for understandable reasons, don't want to talk about surviving infidelity. It's
Mhm.
personal and there's so much judgment. The other
Mhm.
thing I want to say is that don't judge anybody or be sure you know what you would do until you're in those shoes. I know I have not done, excuse me, in previous relationships what I thought I would have done when I was
Mhm.
faced with with the situation.
Mm.
And if you are going through something like that and you think there's even 1% of you that might want to see if it works, give it a shot, but
Yeah.
definitely seek professional help.
Yeah. Yeah. Colette, you are so amazing. I mean, I wish we had more time to dig into. I know I was in the middle of packing. I got a text from
That's
Colette and I'm like,
okay.
oh my gosh, it's our day to come. So it's my fault that we lost that last
That's
5 minutes. But
okay.
I am grateful for you. I know people will probably want
Likewise.
to hear more of your professional perspective. So tell us how to connect with some of your advice, or even if you're in the Orlando area, I'm not sure if you're taking on new clients, but how best to reach out.
Yes, so I am not taking new clients right now, but I'm in Baldwin Park and my website is colettejanefehr.com. And I do have a waiting list. I also have a great newsletter that I send out with tips and advice. I'm on social media at Colette Jane Fehr, both on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. I put out a lot of videos with information, and my book will be out sometime next year.
Yay.
So, yep. And it's all on relationship communication.
And your podcast too.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Sunny. Oh my
Can't
God.
forget about that. Oh my
I
gosh.
can't even keep track of my own stuff. So my podcast is Insights from the Couch. I co-host it with another therapist, Laura Bowman, and it's specifically for women in middle life. We really aim to be a valuable resource for all the things, the many hats we wear,
Mhm.
change of life, anxiety, depression, perimenopause, kids, you name it. So check us out.
Mm. It's a real potpourri of issues, isn't it, at midlife?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Crazy. Colette, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thanks, Sunny, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this latest episode of We Gotta Talk. If you don't mind, I would love if you could leave a rating and review. Those help this show to get out to people who might find it useful or entertaining. I'm so grateful for your support. Please follow on Instagram at Sunny Abada or check out our latest blog post at wegottatalk.com/blog. See you next time.